Great to have you with us. We're going to go to the Middle East now. Took a lot of time today on Russian collusion in Helsinki and the summit. But now we're going to go to a development in the Middle East that is very riveting. And to break this down for us, joining us now from California, the West Coast, so we had to get up early. We appreciate that. Dr. Kristian Ulrichsen. Dr. Ulrichsen is a Baker Institute Fellow for the Middle East. He's worked across the disciplines of political science, international relations, and the international political economy. His research examines the changing position of Persian Gulf states in the global order, as well as the emergence of long-term non-military challenges to regional security. Previously, Dr. Ulrichsen worked as a senior Gulf analyst at the Gulf Center for Strategic Studies between 2006 and 2008, as co-director of the Kuwait Program on Development, Governance, and Globalization in the Gulf States at the London School of Economics, 2008 to 2013. So you want some information and break things down in the Middle East? We've gone to the expert, Dr. Kristian Ulrichsen. Great to have you with us, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for being up early in California as well. I really appreciate it. I know sometimes it's time you got to get up and get a cup of coffee and like, what time is this? So thanks for doing that.
A cup of tea.
A cup of tea. That's right. I should know that. A cup of tea. I'm on coffee cup number 6. So, back here in the East, we love that we're flowing, as they say, flowing the Dr. Joe. Dr. Ulrichsen, a new development. This is kind of controversial. This is kind of interesting and controversial. The state of Israel passes a new law yesterday defining the country as a Jewish homeland. The parliament yesterday adopted a law defining because they're 7 hours ahead, defining the country as the nation state of the Jewish people. Now, there's some people say that this is going to lead to extended discrimination against the Palestinian citizens there, and the law defining the country as a Jewish homeland. Now, this could further marginalize, people don't realize this, there's 1.8 million Palestinians, citizens of Israel. What do you make of this, sir?
Well, I think the decision to make that announcement today was logical, following on from Donald Trump's decision last December to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. It's the Israeli government really trying to keep up the momentum and to perhaps push through some of the policies they've long wanted to try and achieve, and with previous U.S. governments felt they would never have the international backing. And so I think we see here a further move that could create further destabilizing ripple effects across the Middle East, as we've seen with other elements of the current administration's unanticipated consequences of its Middle East policies.
Dr. Ulrichsen, I really find this to be a stunner because it kind of came, we had heard it bubbling up, but a lot of people thought this was going to fail. I did. I'm not close enough to it in the Israel parliament, but it was adopted 62 to 55. It also made Hebrew the country's national language and defines the establishment of Jewish communities, occupying communities, some people would say, right, as being in the national interest. The bill, get this, the bill also strips Arabic of its designation as an official language in the state of Israel, downgrading it to a special status that enables its continued utilization within Israeli institutions. I mean, this is a dramatic piece of legislation passed by the Israeli parliament, really disenfranchising almost 2 million of their citizens. And so what you said is you're tracing it back to the U.S.'s movement of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Why do you think that was the catalyst for this?
Well, I mean, you're right. It's a fundamental change in the character of Israel, and it goes against decades of initial attempts to integrate all the communities who were living in Israel and in the territory that became Israel in 1948. And so it's clearly a major move. I think we have seen over the past 18 months the tectonic plates in the Middle East really shifting in response to the fact that we do have an administration in Washington, D.C. that perhaps is more open to taking different policy decisions. And the U.S. does have and continues to hold great sway over developments in the Middle East in both a negative and a positive sense. And so once I think the Israeli government and other governments, the Saudi government, the Emirati government as well, realized that the White House would be a very different place over the next 4 years, they began, I think, to probe and to try to see what policies they could try and push through that clearly would have been quite provocative under any other administration. And so this decision, which really changes the nature of Israel's governing arrangements and perhaps even calls into question the democratic nature of Israel, is perhaps not to be unexpected by the standards of which we're living. It also makes it very interesting now to see whether any of Israel's Arab neighbors in the Middle East will follow through with the Trump administration's attempts to have a peace plan, because Israel has responded now with clearly a move that will be very provocative to many in the Middle East. And so the costs perhaps of aligning with a peace plan have gone up quite considerably.
We're with Dr. Kristian Coates. Dr. Kristian Coates Ulrichsen. He is a Baker Institute fellow for the Middle East, with us talking about the Israeli situation. Dr. Ulrichsen, I got to ask this question, and then I'm going to get to some of the reactions you're going to expect from some of the Gulf states. But Jared Kushner just made a trip through the Middle East, trying to find a way to bring President Abbas of Palestine to the negotiating table. And as you know, he met with UAE, Saudi, he met with the state of Qatar, he went to Kuwait, and the Saudis are the key to this thing. They have a common enemy, that's Iran. So they have this ultimate deal on the table. But now you look at and obviously Jared Kushner had to know this was coming down the pike, right? So now we're at this point where you don't think he knew?
No, I imagine he must have known. He must have had an inclination.
He had to know.
Yes.
Right,
yeah,
he had to know.
He may not
so
have been able to put it into context if he doesn't have deep expertise that one might expect of a U.S. negotiator. That would be perhaps something that we would see as a red flag, the lack of negotiating expertise in clearly what has been a flashpoint in Middle East politics for many, many decades.
Yes. So my question is, you've got the Trump plan, which we don't know what it is, right? They don't want to leak it out, but it's called the ultimate plan. But how do you have a plan now? You just disenfranchise 2 million people. You're not going to integrate them. It can't possibly lead to a two-state solution. So where are the Israelis going with this?
Well, yes, it's very difficult to imagine that the plan, whatever that may have been, and as you said, we don't specifically know what the plan actually entailed, has made it much more difficult now to achieve. It's been a deeply provocative move. And perhaps one might think that, as with other Israeli moves in some of the occupied territories, they are just creating facts on the ground, which, irrespective of whether there's a plan or not a plan, leaves Israel in possession of some of the objectives and goals that it's long tried to achieve. And so this may be more about Israel or the Israeli leadership deciding to put into place some desired outcomes without really thinking about whether the plan will work or not. It's putting its own interests first, as, of course, many other nation states would do the same.
Dr. Ulrichsen, would it be fair to conjecture that perhaps the Israelis moved on this now because they didn't think the Trump administration would react disfavorably to it? Is that a fair conjecture that I can make?
I imagine so. I mean, I suspect that they have made a move because they felt they could succeed, and of course that may not have been an assumption they could have made 2 years ago, or maybe again in another 2 years from now.
So they thought they had a favorable timing, because when you look at this move and the significance of it, basically, I mean, I don't know how else to put this. They're disenfranchising virtually 2 million of their residents. Palestinians living in Israel are just disenfranchised. They downgraded their language. They can't now be a full U.S. citizen based on this without some going through something. So I don't see how you go from there to a peace process. Could you ever see a two-state solution now after this?
Well, it would be very difficult to see that happening if this law is fully implemented and if it continues to be on the books. I mean, of course, there are different segments of the population. The Palestinians in Israel have been steadily more marginalized for the last 20 years. First, their economic rights to work in Israel were steadily eroded. Then the occupied territories were effectively sealed off. So, I mean, this is a process that's been taking place for quite some time. There are also the Israeli Arab communities, and they're the ones who I think will feel the full effect of this because they are Israeli citizens. And, of course, now they're perhaps complaining that they're second-class Israeli citizens, that you introduce this sort of status within the category of citizenship. So for the Palestinians, it's just formalization of a process that's taken place for almost 20 years, since the 2000 Intifada really signaled the end of the 1990s peace attempts. But for the Israeli Arabs, this is something quite disturbing and quite new.
We're with Dr. Kristian Ulrichsen. He is a Baker Fellow for the Middle East and a longtime expert in the area. He also attended the London School. He was co-director of the Kuwait Program on Development, Governance, and Globalization in the Gulf States at the London School of Economics. Let me get this straight, from 2008 to 2013. Sir, you have a very long, very impressive resume. I can't get it all out of it. To go over your experience would take my whole show up. So just trust me on this, everybody. This guy really knows what he's talking about. So let's get to the Gulf states. I mean, how are they going to react to this? And let's just run right down. Let's just start with the Saudis. Again, inconceivable to me that Jared Kushner was there a month ago and this topic didn't come up, or Kushner didn't know it was coming up, because if he didn't, then it would be even more shocking to me as he was there. But how are the Saudis going to react to this?
Well, this puts the young Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who was in the U.S. in March and April, and who gave speeches to various audiences in the U.S. proclaiming his tacit support for a solution. It puts him in a very difficult position, because Saudi Arabia has always tried to pitch itself as the leader of Islam and the leader of Sunni Islam, and any notion that they're betraying the Palestinians will be felt. And for the Crown Prince himself, he is not yet the king. He probably would like to become the king of Saudi Arabia very soon, but the king is his father, King Salman. And King Salman has a much more pro-Palestinian orientation than the Crown Prince. In fact, there are suggestions that the king does not share the Crown Prince's enthusiasm to make a deal with Jared Kushner, with the Trump administration, and with Israel. And so this announcement is likely to further anger King Salman, who, despite his age, he's 82, still remains in control and has the final say, and could lead to a difference between him and the Crown Prince, who, of course, has developed close relations with Jared Kushner, and who I think would quite have liked the prospect of being seen as the other half of the deal-making duo on this. So for the Saudis, it puts them in a very difficult position, especially the Crown Prince.
I agree with that, and especially because he hasn't assumed full power, although he's consolidating it, as you know. And that's another thing where you can say the Trump administration has looked the other way, if you want to put it in those terms rather starkly. His consolidation of power, the arresting of various competitors that under the guise of corruption, that's all come under a question now, staying at the Ritz or whatever they're doing. What about the Emirates? Now, Kushner also met with them. They're normally, how do you think the UAE reacts?
Well, when we talk about the United Arab Emirates, we really mean Abu Dhabi, which is the driving force right now within the UAE. And the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Mohammed bin Zayed, is very close to Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. This new Abu Dhabi-Saudi axis has really tilted the politics of the Gulf in a much more hawkish direction. They've really coordinated on a number of things, including the war in Yemen and the blockade of Qatar. The UAE is in a difficult position, I think, right now in Washington, partly because the Mueller investigation is looking into the attempts they may have made to influence U.S. politics in 2016 and last year. So they've been keeping, I think, a lower profile. That said, the Emirates are also very supportive in private, I think, of the plan that Kushner apparently is making, and the fact that the Saudis, or at least Mohammed bin Salman, also seems to be on board is an indication that the Emirates are also pushing the plan and potentially trying to force any plan that develops onto Palestinians using financial leverage as an inducement, and potentially as a disincentive to anyone who doesn't want to make a deal. There's a Palestinian strongman called Mohammed Dahlan, who is a former security official who could be the person they try to insert into the occupied territories as the replacement for President Abbas. And Mohammed Dahlan has long been based in Abu Dhabi, and he has a very close relationship with the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. So he's a sort of a card that they've been holding to see if they can play it at some point.
So you've got the access going on here between UAE, Abu Dhabi, and the Saudis. And I agree with you. The Abu Dhabi, I think they were the biggest backer of the Kushner plan. No question about it. Let's get to the state of Qatar, then, their reaction. The young emir who's had to deal with this blockade crisis, which the Qatari government has very successfully maneuvered its way through, and many of them, like me, looking at their economy right now, think they're better off post-blockade than they were pre-blockade, humanitarian issues notwithstanding, Dr. Ulrichsen. So where's the state of Qatar now? Where does the state of Qatar come in this equation?
Well, the Qataris have and are able to leverage relationships they've built up both with the Israelis and in Gaza. They've been active in humanitarian and reconstruction in Gaza for several years, and they've been working very closely with the Israelis and the U.S., of course, to coordinate their actions, contrary to some of the Saudi and Emirati accusations against them. So the Qataris could play an important role in trying to diffuse any tensions that this and other announcements may make, because they have those productive working relationships with people on the ground. So I think the Qatari utility right now will be to try and work quietly with the contacts they have to make sure, or at least to try and minimize the fallout from any anger that might have been generated, and to ensure that there's local buy-in, at least a degree of local buy-in to a plan that otherwise could be seen as just being imposed top-down by negotiators who are not even Palestinian. You have Jared Kushner, you have Mohammed bin Salman, you have the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. This is very much an external plan And if it is a plan, of course, that it would be imposed on the Palestinians. So to succeed, there would have to be that local support, local buy-in. And the Qataris, having been working on the ground with the Israelis and in Gaza, can play an important role in that respect.
So do you see perhaps their young Emir having a significant seat at this negotiating table and playing a key role, sir?
Well, I think he should do. Of course, if we have the plan being driven by the Crown Princes of Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Abu Dhabi, his two sort of bitter adversaries in the Gulf, that might make it difficult. But if that can be stripped away, then there should be a prominent seat for the Qataris, because unlike the Saudis and Emiratis, who are trying to impose this plan externally and from above, the Qataris have the contacts on the ground on both sides to try and actually build up some grassroots support for it, and that would be important. In fact, it would be essential if this plan is to succeed.
Not to paraphrase, but the understanding of what you're saying, Dr. Ulrichsen, so because of UAE, Abu Dhabi's, and Saudi's already predetermined positions, it's possible that Emir Al-Thani of Qatar could play a very significant role, because they might be looked at as a more objective party. Plus, they have relationships on both sides where that is lacking with Abu Dhabi and the Saudis. So they could actually then play quite a significant role in this, as I understand it. Final question, because I know we're
triangulate that with the U.S. and with Israel. That would be extremely important to try and generate that momentum, that support.
Final question. President Abbas, Palestinian president, did this blindside him, and what is his future now?
Well, I think President Abbas has been in a difficult position for quite some time. He obviously has lost a degree of support and even legitimacy, at least in Gaza. And for many years now, he's not held elections to the Palestinian Authority for quite some time. And of course, he's getting old. He's in his 80s as well, and apparently not in the best of health. So it could well be that at some point he decides to step down. Of course, then the question becomes who takes over after him. And is it a candidate that's sort of pushed on the Palestinians by the Saudis, the Emiratis, or by Jared Kushner? Because the candidate in that position would really face, I think, a lot of resistance from internally within Palestinian ranks. And of course, then that would make it even more difficult. It might be part of a plan to impose a solution or impose a kind of a settlement, but it wouldn't be a long-term solution. So I think Abbas has been sidelined. I think he'll find it very difficult to convince the Palestinians that he can successfully counter this latest move or successfully resist any external plan imposed by Jared Kushner and others. But then, of course, the alternative might be actually even worse.
All right. Great analysis. I really appreciate your getting up early for us in
Thank you,
California today, Dr. Kristian Ulrichsen. Thank you so much. That was so enlightening. I really, really appreciate your time, sir. Thank you so much.